When I was a teenager, my dad bought me a classic 1972 Ford Bronco. It was my true passion, and I don't recall a memory from high school that somehow doesn't involve that truck. Plus, my dad and I would spend hours and hours working on it together, and we went through that especially father/son rough patch. When I was teenager, it was always that Bronco that brought us back together. I made a huge mistake and sold the truck when I turned 19, and my dad died of a heart attack 2 months later, so while not logical, I've always felt a karmic connection between the two events. We had a baby in early February. She is our first and the light of my life. My wife is doing well, but she's back at work and she's realized that she hates all the daycares we've tried and really wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and plus she's still very hormonal from delivery, lack of sleep and breastfeeding, so she's having a rough time and is angry a lot. I guess I need to say this. 2 weeks ago, I was driving through our town's warehouse district and saw a Bronco that was pretty beat up but resembled mine. I stopped just for nostalgia's sake, and the owner came out and let me take a look inside. My dad and I had glued a wheat penny under the dash as sort of security measure, so I just sort of checked, and goddamned if it wasn't my Bronco. I asked him if he'd ever consider selling it. He said actually someone was on I-25 as we spoke from Colorado to buy it for $21,000. I freaked out and asked him if I could buy it right then and there for $23,000. He said if I could come up with the cash. Yes. I had been procrastinating setting up a 529, so I had $12,000 in savings that my wife's parents had given us. I maxed out my credit card to Venmo, and my mom bought down a check for $4,000, and I drove away in my old car. It was like a dream come true. Like a literal dream come true. It needs a lot of work I can't afford right now, but it's mine. Like in my driveway, mine. Again. I can't even describe what a joy this is. My wife and her parents are furious with me. They feel I was deceptive, that a real man would have sacrificed anything and everything so my wife could go stay at home with his kids. And that's setting aside that they gave us the money for a college fund. My point is, my daughter is only 6 months old. We have 18 years to set up a college fund of her. But this Bronco means everything to me, and if I wouldn't have acted, it would have been gone forever. Now it can be that same connection between me and my kids. To me, it's the literal meaning of happiness. I talked with my mom, and she is basically going to buy the Bronco from me in order to refill the college fund and pay off the credit card. The $4,000 will be a gift, and she's going to give me whatever I need to restore it. She's always been awesome to me, and she's rather the money be spent now than wait for me and my sister's inheritance. I didn't tell my wife that my mom bailed me out and lied and said I found a buyer for the Bronco. I'll figure out how to cross that bridge when I get there, but my wife was so relieved that I had come to your senses. I don't want to disappoint her. It's going to take all my lying skills to pull this one off over the next few years. My fiancé, James, and I have been together for 3 years, planning a wedding for October 2016. A few months before we met, James bought a brand new home in a newer subdivision. We recently refinanced it and added my name. Before me, James dated a woman, Britt, for about 7 months. She's never been to this current house. From what he's told me, they broke up when he decided they weren't as compatible. The breakup was rough, to the point where he and neighbors called the police when she wouldn't leave his front yard and was screaming at 10 p.m. at night. This is all from what he and his sister have told me. I don't have a reason to not believe them. I've only had a few run-ins with Britt. These have been at restaurants or just coincidences out in public. We never spoke up until now. The problem, Britt has bought a house in the same subdivision that we live in. We even share a cul-de-sac. The only reason we found out about this is from a flyer we got welcoming her to the neighborhood. Our subdivision is very community-oriented. James insists he's never told her where he lives and hasn't spoken to her since the night he called the police. We both brushed it off as a coincidence, but lately it's becoming very weird. Here's why. I work for a company that allows me to work from home 3 out of the 5 days. Our home is a ranch and my office window faces the street. I'm not sure what Britt does for a living, but she does not work during the day. From about noon until 3, she spends her time walking up and down our street. When she passes our house, she doesn't take her eyes off of it. It's almost like she can see me in the office. She'll even stop in front of our house and stretch there for about 5 minutes. Every day anyone is at home. It makes me uncomfortable to the point where I have all of our blinds closed during the day. I understand the need for exercise, but she walks for 3 hours just going up and down our street. Another issue is when either James or I are outside with the dog, she'll let her dog outside and it will come sprinting to our yard. This causes her to come and get her dog. Every time she says, "I'm sorry, we're still working on training," James and I are always polite. Normally, I would be okay with this, but James has pointed out that any other time she lets her dog out and we're not outside, she'll immediately correct him before he runs off. She never corrects him when we're outside. We've been getting ding-dong ditched a lot since she's moved in, something that's never happened in the 4 years that James owned the house. The doorbell will ring around dinner time, between 6 and 8, and by the time anyone gets to the door, no one will be there. It's gotten to the point where our Doberman has picked up the routine and waits by the front door, pacing. The last issue, which I believe might be illegal, is that our mail seems to go missing for a while and then pop back up. What I mean is, Brit will knock on our door and say that she received our mail and is just returning it. This has never happened with the previous owners in her house. We don't have a new mail carrier either. It seems to happen once a week and she'll always bring it on a Friday night. Based on the date on the envelopes, we can tell she's been holding it all week. This has pushed James over the edge because she had our water bill, which resulted in us being 2 days late on the payment. James is neurotic when it comes to paying bills. Every time I have to convince him not to go over and yell at her because we haven't actually caught her taking it out of our mailbox as much as I try to monitor it. She usually gets 2 days worth of mail because those are the days I'm not working from home. The other days I get it right away. I'm not sure what to do at this point. I don't want to piss her off by confronting her, but how can I get her to stop? She's making us nervous and I feel uncomfortable in my own yard most of the time because I know she is watching. I know this sounds strange, but I'm not sure if I can legally do anything about it. I don't have anything against her, it's just becoming an annoyance. My fiancé and I moved in together shortly before we got engaged. Before we did, we discussed how we'd split the housework and bills. 50-50ths down the middle with some wiggle room for when the other needs help. When we moved, it was into her parents' 2-story garage that they converted into basically an apartment. They offered a low rent, $700 total, and pitch in for the electric and internet so we could save money for our own place and wedding. My fiancé earns more than me and that's cool, I'm proud of her. Before we moved in together it always seemed like she was living paycheck to paycheck, and I chalked it up to the apartment she had prior having insane high rent. She stuck to the 50-50 arrangement at first concerning bills, but she missed often and I had to remind her about it. Post-engagement, she's back to living paycheck to paycheck, either missing or very late with her part of the rent monthly. The 2 utilities we pay, groceries, late with her car payment. Her parents have talked to me multiple times about rent and I've covered her missing portion to get us caught up. And then try talking to her. It always turns into her saying we should just move if her parents are going to hound us. I told her we're lucky it's her parents because anywhere else would have kicked our asses out. On top of that, I pay my own bills, do about 65% housework, arrange and pay for most of our dates and vacations, gifts for her, pay most towards our pets. I've suggested a financial coach, but what kicks me is whenever we're around others. She boasts about being the breadwinner since she earns more, goes on about the stresses of being the main source of income, all the hours she has to work to pay all our bills. I was letting it slide until few days ago we were at a get-together. She and her sister started up again about her being the breadwinner. Her sister said something to the effect of her ex-boyfriend had a hard time being with someone who earned more, and my fiancé went, "Good thing OP doesn't mind me bringing home the pay." I told her just because she earns more doesn't make her the breadwinner when she blows it all on herself and I'm paying most the bills. She's embarrassed now and keeps saying I made her look bad and got her in trouble with her parents, because they want to see what she spends her money on each month, but I don't think I did anything wrong. Last night I was ready to just postpone the engagement. As of this morning, after a lot of talking and things coming to light, we are broken up. She insisted we could afford her purchases based off our total incomes. Her parents were under the impression she was also paying off my student loans, my car, my phone, and paying for our vacations. She didn't get evicted from her last apartment, but she was late with her rent often enough that they weren't going to renew her lease. So she didn't suggest us moving to a bigger apartment at her building. Biggest nope, I'm out. The monthly take-home amount she told me was what she earned before wage garnishment kicked in addition to mass debt. She's been doing some online stuff to make up for the money she loses due to that. I got the ring back. My boyfriend started asking to join me in my girls' night in. Every time I tried to say no, he'd be like, I have to join or you'll have to cancel. It made me and the girls miserable having to sit there with him in the middle. This past Friday he insisted to join us again. I had enough. I came up with an idea to get him to hate hanging out with us. Made a plan and told the girls what we were going to do, and they were down for OT. The girls came and my boyfriend immediately sat with us and started ruining our conversations by steering them towards him/his work/his achievement. So here's what I did. I started bringing up gross/embarrassing subjects, and the girls were eating them up by talking about them in details. Subjects like sex, periods, his most sensitive spot, cramp diarrhea, hairy legs, fart getting trapped in the vulva and coming out the front, squeezing shit out of our faces, cramp diarrhea, dirty underwear, and again, cramp diarrhea. We talked about this stuff in boring details, like, I could feel his discomfort without even looking at him. But God, when I turned to see why he got quiet suddenly, he was getting red in the face, and had sweat all over his forehead. I bet he found himself unable to relate to this subject, thus couldn't take part in the conversation. He got up from the couch ready to head out. I looked at him and asked where he was going, and he was like, I just remembered that I have an important meeting with a guy in about 10 minutes, and I have to go now. He rushed out telling us to have fun. The girls and I started laughing hysterically. He came home and berated me, saying I made him feel uncomfortable/sick with the horrible subjects I kept bringing. I said, what you talking about? This is the typical stuff girls talk about all the time, but he insisted I made him upset and caused him to leave. He declined to speak to me and been quiet since then. This is his apartment. He tells me who is and isn't allowed to come, and I thought this was fine since it's his place. Though I help with the bills, but he makes so much more as the head of security in his company, so that's that. I just can't believe how dense and blind I've been to his negative ways. He's still giving me the silent treatment, and I've decided it's just a lot to take. And so I'm temporarily moving in with one of the girls and will now be definitely reconsidering few things. Now both of my kids, 16-year-old son and 9-year-old daughter, and my ex are extremely mad at me because I won't give up my appointed time with them. My son won't even talk to me, and my daughter is crying all the time. Me and my ex divorced shortly after my daughter was born. I blame him for it and he blames me. I won't go into detail here. We ended up with a 50-50 custody agreement, switching every other week. While this was 8 years ago, we're still not on good terms. We rarely ever talk to each other outside of the kids, and I'm perfectly fine with that. One thing we have agreed on since the beginning though is that we don't plan things on days that aren't ours. And unless it's extremely important, we don't switch days or weeks. In the 8 years since we've been divorced, I have never asked him to have the kids on a day that isn't mine, and I've never given him one of my days even if he begged. Well, last week my ex contacted me and told me the good news. His parents are hosting a week-long family reunion in the summer at Disneyland, and he wants to take the kids. Well, the problem is that it's on one of my weeks. He asked me to let the kids stay with him that week or to switch a week with me, and I shot him down. It's my week with them and I get to spend it with them. I told him if it's so important to him to reschedule, but he claims his parents can't do that, and this is the only week that the whole family can go, and he told me that I need to think of them. I told him, tough luck, and hung up on him. Well, this last Sunday when my ex dropped the kids off with me, my son refused to talk to me at all, and my daughter wouldn't even look at me. When I asked my ex what was wrong, he refused to talk to me, only saying ask them in a snarky tone before leaving. When I asked my daughter what was wrong, she burst into tears and said that I was not letting daddy take them to Disneyland. Asking my son, who still refuses to talk to me. It turns out that my ex told them I was not letting them go to Disneyland with him. He's trying to paint me as the bad guy. I sat both of them down last night to talk to them and explain it's my week with them, but they refused to listen to me. My daughter just cried, and my son told me I'm only doing this to get back at my ex. I think it's unfair for him to do this when his parents scheduled it during my time with them. I demanded an apology from my ex and him to set things straight, but he refuses, and his last text to me being, can't tell them the truth 'cause they already know it. I'm so pissed right now.